of the research that could help guide the intervention that would address racial disciplinary disproportionality.
Nationally, there is an increasing awareness and documentation of the overrepresentation of African American students in secondary discipline referrals. National data clearly indicates that this is a significant and pervasive issue that is increasing in severity over time. Across the U.S., black students represent barely 20% of secondary public school students, but they account for roughly half of all suspensions and expulsions. The current body of research in the field suggests that there is not a significant difference in behavior between black and white students to account for the disciplinary disproportionality. However, the research does indicate that there are a variety of institutional factors that contribute to disciplinary disproportionality, including the racial composition of the school and the staff, teacher instructional strategies, and most importantly, teacher cultural competency, which includes staff deficit mindset, implicit bias, and teacher-student cultural mismatch. Additional institutional factors are the traditional purposes of education and enculturation, non-culturally inclusive school environments, and primarily zero tolerance and other discriminatory behavior practices. There has been little direct empirical research to assess the effect of interventions on the identified institutional factors, but there are trends in other generalizable studies that support an intervention that consists of staff training and culturally competent classroom management strategies combined with a retooling of the school's zero-tolerance discipline policy. An analysis of the literature reveals that a lack of teacher cultural competency as a driver of disciplinary disproportionality manifests itself in many ways. Numerous studies have shown that white teachers tend to harbor implicit bias and possess a deficit mindset toward their minority students. Additionally, research has shown that the cultural mismatch between white, often middle-class teachers creates a mismatch of cultural capital between teachers and their often impoverished black students. Teachers also self-report having a lack of knowledge of best practices for minority students or do not acknowledge that different best practices exist for black and white students, which is an example of what the research identifies as colorblind racism. The research also documents that black teachers are more effective with black students than white teachers are. Two main studies document the how and why of this phenomenon and conclude that black teachers understand the important connections between the students' home situations and school and are thus able to build on and learn from those out-of-school experiences and situations in their teaching. They also were able to connect with the students more because they understood that the students' behaviors, whether good or bad, were often a result of their out-of-school experiences. They also refused to give students permission to fail and maintained high expectations for all of their students. They did not pity them, but were able to empathize with them and didn't let them just get by and refused to tolerate non-productive behavior. They were also more comfortable with their students. In fact, when surveyed, white teachers self-reported feeling a greater loss of classroom control and fear when describing their interactions with classroom management of black students versus white students. Teachers are more likely to respond in culturally incongruent ways that result in exclusionary discipline for black students when they feel vulnerable in the classroom. To this end, McIntosh and colleagues detail, over several different highly cited articles, a conceptual framework to address these vulnerable decision points. The idea behind training for VDPs is when a teacher reaches a point in the classroom discipline cycle where he or she would normally send a student out, the teacher avoids what could be a knee-jerk reaction by resorting to a common, building-wide toolkit that includes common vocabulary and phrases, such as, "I would appreciate it if we could end this discussion now and talk about it again after class," or, "Please take a moment in the hall and re-enter when you feel comfortable joining us in learning." These measures allow the student to not be removed to the office for consequences, give the student more choice and ownership of their actions, and prevent teachers from making rash and often emotional decisions. While there is no documented research as yet as to the effectiveness of this strategy, conceptually it should work to reduce racial disciplinary disproportionality. There is actually little available literature describing what actually works to increase teacher cultural competency, but there is research as to what doesn't. Cultural sensitivity training intended to combat implicit bias has not achieved that result and has traditionally been minimally effective. Additionally, cultural competency training offered as a one-and-done with no follow-up, or less than 60 to 90 hours of total material, has proven to be similarly ineffective. Another related factor driving the problem of practice is the use of zero-tolerance behavior policies. Black students fall victim to exclusionary discipline under zero-tolerance policies at a rate of between 3 and 7 times their peers, depending on the part of the nation where they live. Zero-tolerance policies affect black students more severely than white students and promote absenteeism, reduce academic achievement, promote the school-to-prison pipeline, and have been proven to have no positive impact on future student behavior. An alternative is restorative justice, whereby students are removed from the educational environment only as a last resort, and instead participate in a variety of activities that restore the relationship between the offended parties and reduce the likelihood of future misbehavior through behavior. Violating students might have to have a conference with the affected parties, write a letter of apology, or perform community service in addition to participating in reflective activities about their behavior and learning new and different strategies for managing the drivers of their misbehavior. Positive behavior support systems are often utilized simultaneously to reward the target behavior. Restorative justice is relatively new, but there have been recent longitudinal studies from across the nation that show that restorative justice programs consistently improve attendance, reduce incidents of future misbehavior, and reduce disciplinary disproportionality. The need to increase teacher cultural competency in meaningful, lasting ways and the promise of restorative justice supports an intervention that features initial teacher cultural competency training on implicit bias and VDPs, that features monthly follow-up discussions and reflections, as well as quarterly data monitoring, and a PBIS framework for rewarding successful teachers and supporting teachers who are not showing favorable results. Simultaneously, the current zero-tolerance policy should be replaced with some degree of a restorative justice model that promotes strengthening student-teacher relationships and positive behavior retraining.